In the summer of 1947, one of the greatest migrations in human history began. 15 million people abandoned everything they had ever known: their homes, their streets, their graves. And along the roads, the rivers, and the railway tracks, nearly 2 million of them never made it. This is not just the story of a border. This is the story of what happens when empires draw lines and leave the people to bleed.
For nearly 200 years, the British Crown had held the Indian subcontinent in its grip. 350 million people, dozens of religions, hundreds of languages, thousands of years of history, all compressed under one colonial flag. But by 1945, that grip was slipping. Britain had emerged from World War II victorious and completely broken. The treasury was empty, the army was exhausted, and across India, an independence movement that the empire could no longer ignore was reaching a boiling point. The British had a decision to make. They could manage a slow, careful transition, taking years to negotiate a united India, or they could leave fast. They chose to leave fast. In February 1947, Prime Minister Clement Attlee made the announcement that would change the subcontinent forever. Britain would hand over power by August 1947, giving itself less than 6 months to dismantle 2 centuries of empire. The man they sent to do it was Lord Louis Mountbatten, a naval commander, a royal cousin, and a man with almost no experience in the complex politics of South Asia. He was given an impossible task in an impossible time frame, and the consequences would be catastrophic. At the center of the partition crisis was a single, explosive question. Would an independent India be one nation or two? For decades, this debate had torn Indian politics apart. The Indian National Congress, led by Jawaharlal Nehru and Mahatma Gandhi, believed in a united, secular India where Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs could all live as equals. But Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the calculating, Oxford-educated leader of the Muslim League, had reached a different conclusion. He looked at the numbers. Muslims were roughly a quarter of India's population, 300 million people, concentrated in the northwest and the east. In a democratic, united India, he argued, they would always be outvoted, always be a minority, always be vulnerable. His demand was simple and non-negotiable: a separate nation for Muslims, Pakistan. After years of failed negotiations, Mountbatten accepted the inevitable. India would be partitioned. But someone had to draw the border. That man was Sir Cyril Radcliffe, a British lawyer who had never set foot in India before in his life. He was handed maps, census data, and 5 weeks. 5 weeks to decide the fate of hundreds of millions of people. Radcliffe worked in near total isolation, under immense pressure from all sides. Congress wanted certain cities. The Muslim League wanted certain rivers. The Sikhs, who had their homeland, Punjab, sitting directly in the path of the border, wanted to not be divided at all. There was no clean answer. There was no perfect line. On August 17, 1947, 2 days after independence had already been declared, the Radcliffe Line was published. 2 new nations woke up to discover where they now lived, and millions of people realized, overnight, that they were suddenly on the wrong side.
What followed was the largest forced migration in recorded human history. In Punjab, the fertile, ancient heartland split directly in 2. The chaos was immediate and absolute. Muslims west of the line began moving toward Pakistan. Hindus and Sikhs east of the line began moving toward India. And on both sides of that invisible boundary, violence erupted with a speed and ferocity that shocked even the most hardened observers. Neighborhoods that had coexisted for generations turned on each other in days. Villages were burned, Trains were stopped and their passengers massacred. Columns of refugees stretching for miles were ambushed on open roads. The killings were not random. They were organized, carried out by militias, by mobs, and in some cases by people who had been neighbors, friends, even relatives. Sikh jathas, armed bands, attacked Muslim convoys in Punjab. Muslim groups killed Hindu and Sikh refugees in the western districts. On both sides, women bore a specific and horrifying cost: abducted, assaulted, killed, in what historians have called a deliberate use of gendered violence as a weapon of ethnic cleansing. The British, who had ruled this land for nearly 2 centuries, had fewer than 50,000 troops left in the country. They were already preparing to leave. The Boundary Force, a joint military unit specifically created to manage partition violence, had just 50,000 soldiers to police an area of 37,500 square miles. It was never enough. In the chaos, entire trainloads of refugees arrived at their destinations as ghost trains, every passenger dead. One railway official described opening a train carriage in Lahore and finding nothing but silence and blood.
But the violence of partition did not only take the form of massacres. It also took the form of war. Under the partition plan, the hundreds of princely states across India were given a choice: accede to India, accede to Pakistan, or remain independent. Most chose quickly. One did not: Kashmir. The state sat at the very top of the subcontinent, bordered by both India and Pakistan, with a predominantly Muslim population, but a Hindu Maharaja, Hari Singh, who dreamed of independence. In October 1947, that dream ended. Tribal militias from Pakistan's northwest, supported, equipped, and in some accounts directed by Pakistani military officers, swept across the border into Kashmir. Maharaja Hari Singh panicked. He signed the instrument of accession to India. Indian troops airlifted into Srinagar within hours. The First Kashmir War had begun. For over a year, Indian and Pakistani forces fought across the mountains and valleys of one of the most strategically critical pieces of land on Earth. The war ended in a UN-brokered ceasefire in January 1949, leaving Kashmir divided along a line of control that satisfied no one. Pakistan controlled the west, India controlled the east. Both nations claimed the whole. That ceasefire line is still there today, and Kashmir is still unresolved. A 77-year-old wound that has pushed 2 nuclear-armed nations to the edge of war more than once. Let's pause and look at what partition actually cost.
15 million people displaced, the largest single forced migration in human history. Estimated 200,000 to 2 million dead. The range itself tells you something. No one kept proper records in the chaos. No one could. 75,000 to 100,000 women abducted or assaulted during the violence, a figure that historians believe is still deeply undercounted. Lahore, one of the subcontinent's greatest cities, a center of culture, commerce, and learning, went from majority Hindu and Sikh to almost entirely Muslim in a matter of weeks. Amritsar, the spiritual heart of Sikhism, home to the Golden Temple, lost its Muslim population almost entirely. Families that had lived side by side for centuries were separated by a line drawn by a man who had never met them. And many of those families never found each other again.
This is the question that historians, politicians, and the descendants of partition survivors have been arguing about for 77 years. Was it the British who rushed a 200-year-old empire's exit in 5 months, leaving behind no peacekeeping framework, no proper transition plan, and a border drawn in deliberate secrecy? Was it Mountbatten, whose personal relationships with Nehru and his own impatience accelerated a timeline that was already dangerously fast? Was it Jinnah,
whose insistence on a separate Muslim state made partition inevitable, even if his vision of Pakistan was always more secular than the nation that actually emerged. Was it Congress, who, some historians argue, made Jinnah's fears seem justified by their handling of power sharing in the 1930s? Or was it the ordinary men with weapons, the militias, the mobs, who made a political catastrophe into a human one? The honest answer is all of them, and none of them fully. Partition was not the result of a single decision or a single villain. It was the accumulated weight of 2 centuries of colonial rule, a system that had deliberately categorized, divided, and played communities against each other, collapsing in a matter of months under pressure that no plan could have fully managed. But that does not mean the deaths were inevitable. The speed was a choice. The secrecy of the border announcement was a choice. The failure to deploy adequate security forces was a choice. And those choices had consequences measured in bodies on trains, in rivers, and on roads.
77 years later, the border still exists. The line of control in Kashmir is still one of the most militarized frontiers on Earth. India and Pakistan, 2 nations born from the same land, the same history, the same people, have fought 4 wars and come close to a 5th. But beyond the geopolitics, beyond the military history, there is something else. In every city on both sides of that border, there are families who still carry the memory. A grandfather who walked for 40 days and never spoke about what he saw. A grandmother who left her gold buried in a courtyard she would never see again. A name on a gravestone in a city that is now in a different country. Partition was not just a political event. It was a rupture in the lives of millions of ordinary people. People who had done nothing except exist on the wrong side of a line that a stranger drew in 5 weeks. And that rupture, its grief, its anger, its unfinished business, echoes through South Asia to this day. This was 1947, the war that drew a border in blood. If this story moved you, you are watching War and Military History, where every conflict has a cause, every border has a cost, and every war leaves something behind. Subscribe and stay with us, because history is never truly over.